Hey, Rob, how's it going, man?
It's going great, John. I tell you what, I'm down here at the headquarters for Avidity in North Carolina, and I just kind of got my office really settled here about a month ago, and it's kind of perfectly positioned. I get to look out the window onto the factory floor, and if I go out to the left, I've got the management and the staff of Alpha Tech, who are our manufacturing partners, and things are good, man. Everything's coming along for our first delivery in March of 2023.
So that's some really exciting news. March of 2023. So now tell me a bit about the PD10. Tell me about your line, about your company, how everything came about and about the journey here.
Well, the PD10 is a specific purpose-built gun for the people who really carry, and not people who maybe even carry a gun professionally, but people who carry a gun defensively, in a concealed manner. It's a single stack, very slim gun. I think it's incredibly shootable. I think the contours and the ergonomics, just from having put it in people's hands over the last 6-7 years in various forms, seeing how they react, seeing, the fact that it fits them, whether they have big hands or long fingers or small hands or skinny hands, it accommodates the vast majority of human hands. And I guess that's really where the story starts. For the gun's design is, when I started the project, I was already at about 2 decades of standing on the ranges many, many days a year, up to 250 plus days a year, looking at thousands of people holding guns. And for years, in the community, we've said, I wish guns were designed by shooters instead of marketers or engineers, right? And it's like, wait a minute, how about I do you a step better, and we'll have someone who teaches defensive shooting design the defensive gun, because, a shooter can give you what they want. Like, if I were designing this gun just for me, it wouldn't actually be the gun that it is. But this gun isn't just for me. It's the gun that I think is going to fit the widest majority of that population that, like I said, really trains, really practices, and takes carrying a gun to defend themselves or others in public seriously.
Oh, absolutely. And I did have a chance to visit you at your booth at the 2023 SHOT Show, and I was impressed with the firearm, at least getting my hands on it, manipulating it. I felt that it really does hold true to that slim design, and the grip, both the angle and I guess the way the back strap is and the front straps are designed. I kind of dug the grip on it, and I thought that was unique the way you worked that in. And now, did you find that was a function of, like you said, trying to fit as many people as possible? So you're looking for, people with big hands, little hands. What was kind of the general consensus to get to that point?
Well, it starts with, again, watching thousands of people with guns in their hand all over the world at all kinds of different skill levels for a couple of decades. I know what people fight. Like, let's look at the Glock. Glock's incredibly popular. Glock is a gun that I recommend. I've been, up until we had our insurance and, the company's liability insurance in place, I've been carrying a Glock 48 for the last couple of years, and they make a great gun. And obviously it's durable, reliable. It fits, especially for the armed professionals. It fits really well. But then let's also realize that, it's not a secret that the Glock grip is kind of blocky. It's not the most comfortable. And in the double stack form, the mid-size, 19s and 17s, it's too blocky and too big a grip for a lot of human hands. And that's why you see that, that abrasion, that pressure that gets put on the thumb knuckle. And you see people after they shoot 50, 100 rounds in class, that skin starts to get torn away, or they get the Glock bite if they have big kind of meat hands or fatty hands. They get the slide cutting their hand behind the web. Well, those are just ergonomic conflicts with the general human hand that we as a community have just overlooked or dealt with or fought. Now you go to the other end and you see something like a lot of people love the way a 1911 feels. It's slim. The angle is really nice for the human hand. The gun comes with other potential negatives in terms of reliability, unless you're going to spend a whole lot of money. You've got the manual safety. You've got the 45, of course, is forever. The 9mm weren't all that reliable for a long time. Now we've got good 9mm ones, but you still come with that single action kind of asterisk on that. In between those two things, you see polymer guns like the Steyr M series. Steyr M series has never been incredibly popular in the U.S., but it fits a lot of people's hands. When they put it in their hands, they say, oh, that feels great. Then they start looking for accessories like holsters, or they just look around and which instructors or which gurus are really on the Steyr M series. Well, there aren't that many, so it never really gets that popular. I think the XD series of guns, the Springfield XD, which of course is the HS 2000 from Croatia, that gun fits a lot of human hands, especially in the Mod 2 variation. The single stack, the XDS, was a gun I carried for a long time. The CZ is a gun that has a deep tang. You really get your web of the hand up above the hump of that grip. So when you see all those different hands, you see all those different designs, and you know what fits people, and then you know the reasons a lot of people don't pick the gun that fits them, and they compromise on that perfect fit. That's where it started. So it started with a very slim gun, but if you notice when you look at the gun, it's not very. If you look at it like from the front to the back of the grip, it isn't very thin in that direction. So width, left to right side of the gun, is incredibly thin. The most of the grip is about 0.8 inches. The slide is 0.9, and at the widest part, where the controls stick out a little bit, we are at 1 inch. Something like the Hellcat is 1.1 inches at the slide. Forget about the stuff that sticks out from the slide, the controls and stuff like that. So when you think about it, you're like, well, Rob, that's only 0.1 or 0.2 inches, but we're talking about 15 to 20% less width. And yet, because of the way the gun is contoured, it really does fill the hand. So it's not like some of the guns out there that are really kind of stumpy, with almost like a broomstick feel, to where the hand, especially with two hands on it, it looks like, an octopus trying to grab onto a lollipop. All of a sudden, it doesn't really work that well. So the contours and the ergonomics were the first important parts that made this gun Rob's idea of a good defensive gun. And then from there, the trigger is a different feeling than I think a lot of people are used to, but I think it really is what people need. Having seen people fight heavy walls, staging the trigger and trying to turn a striker fired gun kind of into a single action gun by getting right to the edge and then holding it, get their sight alignment, sight picture, holding their breath, and then trying to snap that shot off. You can get good at that in a static environment, but man, it'd be a lot better if we just had a smooth trigger pull. And that's really what you get out of our we call it smooth strike trigger. It is a striker design. There's going to be a change in pressure. It's not like a pure double action trigger pull, but it's a lot smoother than a lot of the other things out there. And when people are standing in a gun shop or even a SHOT Show playing with the trigger, it feels different. And people can overthink that. When they're on the range shooting it, people generally love the trigger, once they actually see how it works in application versus isolation. Because, you can get sometimes it's taking you 3 seconds to press the trigger, you're probably paying way more attention to trigger press than you are when you're actually on the range shooting, much less in a defensive shooting situation,
No, absolutely. No, I got you. And that's some of the things that you were talking to us about on the design of the firearm, and you kind of had to do a little bit of backwards engineering, because when you created this platform, you said you wanted to start with something that was accessible in the way of a feeding device, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about how that helped shape both the shape and contours of the firearm, as well as the overall size?
There's a couple things there, yeah, for sure, that are important to understand the story of sort of how we get here. When, this all really started as a conversation at a bar in Nuremberg, Germany, during the European version of SHOT Show. It's called the IWA Outdoor Classics Show. And it was 2013. There was a lot of fear in the gun community about what was going to happen after Sandy Hook, and Obama was talking big about gun control and all that. And a lot of companies sprouted up, starting to sell AR-15s. I mean, there must have been 20 companies that year that, all of a sudden people knew the names of that were selling ARs, and some of us were just kind of sitting around like, well, gee, we've been, we got collected 150 years sitting around this high top table in the industry. We should start an AR company too. Kind of a joke, but then some of us at the table carried that conversation on over the next year to say, well, we don't want to be, no, it doesn't really make sense to be yet another AR company. I mean, maybe Avidity Arms will make an AR at some point, but just to do it to make ARs, did it make sense? So it was, what would we do if we were going to make a gun? And then everybody kind of pointed at me, because they were in different aspects of the gun industry, not training, and really most of them not even really shooters. So they're kind of like, well, Rob, you're probably the guy that needs to design a gun if we're really going to start a gun company. And that's where the conversation started. So when I started working with an engineer, the engineer who had a little bit of experience in the gun community also, gun industry, he said, you're really designing two things. You're designing a gun and a magazine. They have to work together kind of flawlessly if you're going to call it a defensive gun. And you have to pick one first. And I said, all right, well, that way it's not it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? It's definitely not horse and cart. There's not one that gets dictated. You pick one. Once it's settled, then you build the other thing. And obviously most people would start with the gun and then find a way to make the magazine work. And what I said was, well, gee, can we just start with a magazine that exists? And if so, let's talk about which one. And through that conversation, knowing what I wanted the eventual gun to be, we landed on the ninth of all things. Rob Pincus looked at the 1911 9mm magazine, particularly the 10-rounders. And without a lot of experience with 10-round 9mm, I had a Colt. I still have it. I have a Colt 9mm and had a bunch of different magazines for it. It was, more or less it worked, but I don't ever really look at a 1911 as an incredibly reliable thing anyway. So I was a bit naive about just saying, oh, let's do a 1911 9mm magazine as if they were all the same. Unfortunately, our engineer at the time, he was also naive in that he didn't realize how big a difference there were in some of those. And he sought out for testing, pick the best one out there. And talking to guys like Rob Latham and guys that really do know that world, we settled on the Chip McCormick 9mm 1911 magazine, not understanding how different it really was from a lot of what else was out there. And then since then, of course, Chip's passed, the company went out of business or sold to Wilson Combat. Wilson Combat discontinued that magazine. So the irony is, in 2014, we thought we just said, okay, we won't worry about building magazines. We'll use this one. And then in 2022, the very last thing we figured out was, wow, we're going to have to make these magazines in-house now. And we are now making a magazine which is based off of the Chip McCormick magazine, which is based off of the original Colt 9mm 1911 magazine, but really is tweaked to be optimized for this gun. So we tell people, we only recommend, especially for carry, that you use the magazines we're selling. However, you will find a varying degree of reliability or usefulness out of other existing 9mm magazines. If you have them, get some of our base plates, and you're going to do fine. But we don't recommend that you assume you're going to be able to go out and just buy any 9mm magazine that's going to work perfectly in the gun. So we ended up kind of in a compromise situation from where we originally started. But we've got a gun like many other companies that with our magazine, we know it is absolutely reliable, and we're not going to lose too much sleep over the fact that it doesn't work with quote unquote other magazines. Right.
Well, yeah, no, and I found that aspect of the story very interesting. And I guess if you were to classify the firearm, because I had it in my hands, I got to manipulate it. It didn't seem like a huge firearm. How would you classify the size? Are you saying this is full size, full frame, or something in between that and, let's say, a compact? What kind of dimensions are we talking about here? Because you're marketing this as a firearm for carry, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I call it a mid-sized gun. And, there's a lot of terms out there that have either changed meaning or lost meaning. The new cool thing is micro compact, and it's like, or a subcompact, right? Well, I remember when the Glock 26 was a subcompact, and it's a thick, kind of chunky gun, right? You compare something like a 365 or a Glock 43. Well, what's that? Well, now that's a micro compact, the Glock 43. Well, the Glock 43 is as most people know, it's just for shooters, we can look at it and say, well, yeah, it's very, very carryable, but it's not very, very shootable. The Glock 48 is much more shootable, but it's kind of bulky for a 10-round gun. And if you use the aftermarket magazines, which I did, I found some Shield magazines that worked really well. You get a 15-round gun. Of course, well, now that leads people to say, well, gee, Rob, you have a 10-round gun. The Glock 48 was a 10-round gun. Does that mean you can now have a 15-round gun? And no, because you got to unpack to the beginning. Mm-hmm. Glock starts with a thicker frame that certainly could have accommodated 40 caliber if they'd have wanted to, and they start with their thicker plastic walled magazine, polymer walled magazine. So when you start with a thinner frame and a thinner slide that will never accommodate 40 caliber, and you start with a metal magazine, there really isn't isn't room to stagger the way Shield has. So some old technology, like plastic magazines inside of a wide frame, you can cheat and get more rounds into. The only thing we might be able to do, and we are looking at it, is there's some flat spring technology out there that might allow us to get a spring that still gives us the amount of force we need on the last round, but also compresses to a small enough size that we might be able to put 11 rounds into our magazine. And we'll know that pretty soon. We're experimenting right now. But for now, 10+1 is where we are. And one of the other things I got to remind people is, 10, 11 years ago, I was, there's a bunch of articles people can find on the Glock 26L. I was one of the guys that was popularizing the idea of chopping Glock 19s down to take Glock 26 mags, or Glock 17s down to take Glock 19 mags, because that shorter grip is more carryable, but the longer slide is more shootable, right?
Yeah,
you get the longer grip, you get more weight in front of the hand.
Sight radius and everything like that.
Yeah. So the Glock 26L was a 19 chopped down to be, guess what? 10+1. So I'm well on record for over a decade, being comfortable with the idea that for defensive carry, for personal defense, 10+1 is plenty of rounds of 9mm, and I don't feel like we're compromising capacity with the PD10. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have a double stack gun, but that double stack gun will be more intended for home defense, for armed professional carry, competition, things like that, recreational shooting. But I don't feel undergunned when I only have 11 rounds of quality 9mm ammo.
Right, and so you're talking about the way the lexicon has changed over the years, and so I would consider this almost like you said, medium size would be like a Glock equivalent to like a compact, right? I think that's what they're calling, say, like the Glock 19, for example, is a compact, and then you get into your subcompacts, like you said, and well, where does that leave 43? I mean, I looked at 43 like it's a pocket pistol marching on its way to the mouse gun or the vest gun, and that's what you're looking at with those very small 9mm and 380s. So since you're, talking about that, and you said you're thinking of maybe stepping up eventually into the full-size arena. Are there plans? I mean, is there something that we should be looking for the future on full-size and, say, subcompacts, or right now we just want to see how we do with this?
Well, I'm obviously, I'm infamous now for doing this all out in the open. Tony Simon, our friend over at Second Amendment 2A for Everyone, Second Amendment for Everyone Diversity Shoot. I know you know Tony really well. He was giving me a little, kind of good-natured ribbing on their podcast, Firearms Insider podcast last week. He went back and found an article I wrote in 2014, and it was a very tongue-in-cheek article, where I kind of said, hey, you're never going to get the perfect carry gun, because the perfect carry gun is going to be a bunch of compromises. And what I actually did was I listed out the specifications of what I was working on at the time, but it wasn't public at that point. And I listed out the specifications of the PD10 as they existed in the spring of 2014. And one of the things I said, obviously to the ironic future, like in this conversation right now, was, and your gun company, if you decide to steal all these ideas and develop a gun like this, I appreciate it. Just please give me credit, and don't talk about it until it's ready. And then, of course, a year and a half later, within a year and a half, I started talking about the PD10 publicly, and it took us another, 7 or 8 years to get it ready. So I do all this in the open, and I don't think it's any secret, to say that, people already have seen prototypes of the PD8, which is the chopped grip version of the PD10, which will be a little easier to conceal, not quite as easy to shoot. That'll be more of a subcompact gun, whereas this one is a normal mid-size, and as you said, Glock would call this a compact, although we're a lot thinner than the Glock 19. And then we are working on a double stack, and in fact, I have a couple teams of engineers. We've got an in-house group, and then I've got some outside guys working on some projects for me. We've got a rifle in the works. We actually are ready to start prototyping that later this year. But I think the double stack is going to be a very quick priority for us. It's not about waiting to see if the PD10 works in some kind of a financial metric, right? We're going to put it out there, and while it's out there being proven, we are going to be continuing to develop other things. So I would think by the end of this year, technically we have two models out right now. We have the PD10 and the PD10 OC with the optic cut slide. I've shown some pictures of a long slide version. I've shown pictures of the PD8 chopped grip, and I think you're going to see a double stack, at least in prototype form by the end of the year, if not possibly being for sale at SHOT Show 2024.
Well, that's really awesome, Rob. And I don't want to talk outside of school, so I'm just going to open up the floor for you if there's anything else that you want to plug or talk about that might be in the hopper or might not be in the hopper. So take that opportunity now, and then this way I can't be accused of letting cats out of bags. So if you have anything else that you want to bring up, please do.
No, man, it's, I wish I could tell you to cut the recording and I'm going to tell you all the secret stuff. I'm not good at keeping secrets, man. I want to see more American gun companies. I want to see more creative and innovative, not only engineering and design, but also approaches to business. I guess one of the things we're doing that's also out there that I don't know if you and I have talked about is we're working on, I've got one sitting on my desk right here, a version of the frame that is 3D printing friendly. So in other words, if you just take the CAD file from our plastic injection molded polymer frame that we have made, to those manufacturer tolerances, if you tried to put that out of your average 3D printer, you wouldn't be able to put the internal parts in because just the tolerances and the specificity of those $150 to $300 printers, you can't get there where you can get with injection molding. The consistency isn't there. And also because the material is different, that PLA plus material is a little more brittle. It's definitely more temperature sensitive. You have to change some of the thicknesses and some of the reinforcements inside of the frame to get it to work well for the home private gun maker. So we had a team help me develop, guys who are way better at 3D printing than I am, develop a 3D printer friendly frame, and we're going to be releasing that at the same time the first guns go out to retail, and we'll be selling parts kits to private gun makers. I think it's incredibly important that the industry work with the private gun making community to make things as safe, as efficient, and as easy as possible. And I have no doubt that once the 3D gun builders get their hands on this file and they get their hands on the guns, they're going to do some creative stuff, and some of it's going to be, funny, just the textures and the images, and they're going to, put a dragon face or something on. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's going to be some fun stuff. But there's also probably going to be some very serious evolutions that come out of the 3D printing hobby private gun making world back into the industry. And I would love to find out that somebody did something with the PD10 that I said, man, that's so good, I wish I did it. Avidity Arms is going to start doing it, and that guy gets compensated for his work by an industry established, traditional Type 7 manufacturer. And I really do think that, I want to try to blaze that trail. I've been talking about it for 2 years about how we need to normalize private gun making and integrate private gun makers more with the general gun community and the gun industry. And some of the organizations like NASGW have backed us in the gun makers matches, things like that. Beretta, of all places, Beretta's high-end shotguns, they put out a 3D printable basically like a engraving plate that you can now put on some of their high-end shotguns. If you have a 3D printer and you want to put your own picture of your hunting dog on the side of it, or you want to put your logo or your name or the Second Amendment or whatever you want to do, they actually put a place on one of their shotgun models now for 3D printers to customize. We're going a step forward to that, and we're actually going to be providing the parts and the instruction manual and the file will be distributed also for free for people that want to build our guns. I think I'm proud of that. I'm excited about that, and that's something I think I hope to see more gun companies doing in the future.
Oh, Rob, you did reach into your bag and you did grab the cat that I was talking about. So I'm glad that you were able to get that through osmosis here. And I think it's very exciting, and it's a unique approach to things. Rob, where can people find you? Where can people find the PD10? How do we get our hands on this firearm? We can look for it. You said March of this year, 2023. Give me all the goods. Where can we find you?
Yeah, we're going to be doing, as we record this, I think it's January 30th. We're going to be shipping before the end of the calendar year in February. We're going to ship out. We are going to have the major distribution to dealers be through Davidson's. I'm really proud of that. Davidson's is a obviously very well established for people inside the industry or for firearms retailers. They know Davidson's. And I don't care who you are, if you don't admit they're one of the top 4 distributors, and a lot of people think they're the top distributor period in the country. I'm just really proud to be aligned with them. And that also means that the average person has access to the gallery of guns. So you can go to galleryofguns.com. You'll see the Avidity Arms PD10 optic cut listed there. Right now, obviously, inventory is 0, but as inventory is filled in February, people will be able to order the gun and have it shipped directly to their FFL. Now, we are also selling the standard slide directly to dealers from Avidity Arms, and anybody can go to avidityarms.com and see the specs, and they can see the threaded barrels and the other things we're going to be offering for sale. Obviously, extra magazines, holsters. We've got great holster support with G-Code, JM4 Tactical, TAC Rig are already shipping holsters for the Avidity Arms PD10 even before we release the gun, which is kind of another little bit of a coup. Too many times in the industry, a company releases their latest, greatest defensive gun, carry gun, ostensibly, but they have no holster support, which is always frustrated the training community. So we wanted to make sure we didn't fall into that trap. But people can learn more about it at avidityarms.com. They can start pestering their local dealers to put an order in with Davidson's or to contact us through the website. And again, galleryofguns.com, have that gun shipped to your local FFL.
Okay, what about Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? Where can we can get you guys there? Avidity
we don't have the Twitter up and running for Avidity Arms yet. Twitter can be a challenge. It's just not something that's high on my priority list right now. But Facebook, we have a page that's been there for years. People can go back and see some of the history. They can see all the times we thought we were close and we were wrong and laugh about that. But more importantly, they can get the up-to-date information over the last couple of months. And then that's at Avidity Arms. And then the Facebook is also Avidity Arms. And we're now located in Fletcher, North Carolina. We're in the process of moving our FFL from St. Augustine. So we've got the office in St. Augustine, but the manufacturing and assembly, almost all of the metal parts are being made in the building I'm sitting in North Carolina. There's a couple springs and a pin that we buy from outside, and we're still buying the magazine bodies and then modifying them here in-house. We're still buying those from outside the building, but we have our injection molding done out of the state, but in the U.S. by a company that many manufacturers use, and they've been with us for 6 years and done great work. So we're proud to be an American company, and it's something I always said, I use Apple products, and I love Toyota trucks, and even though some of them are in the U.S., some of them aren't, I get it. It's a foreign company. I'm not an American-only isolationist kind of guy, but the fact that we can bring a very well-made gun at a fair price and have it all be American-made, we are proud of that.
Well, that's awesome, Rob. I'm really excited about this, and congratulations to you and everyone over there. And I'm really looking forward to eventually getting my hands on one of these firearms as well.
All right, thanks, man. I think that's gonna happen pretty soon. Probably want to get you like a media demo, but also, one of the things we'll talk about, I'm sure, here is when we release these to retailers, a few hand-picked retailers around the country that have really believed in this product for a long time, and they're going to have some of the first guns. So we'll make sure you know where they're going to be in case one's close to you.
That sounds good, Rob. Have a good day, man.